I never thought the man I loved most in this world would be the one I feared lying beside. For 6 years of marriage, David was the steady presence in my life, the man who made me chamomile tea every night, the man who smiled gently when I dragged myself home exhausted from work, the man who kissed my forehead like I was the most precious thing on earth. But that man was a mask, and behind it was a stranger I could barely recognize. It began with something so small I almost ignored it, a bitter taste hidden beneath the honey in my nightly tea. At first I thought maybe the brand had changed, or maybe I was just imagining it. I told myself it was nothing. But the bitter undertone clung to my tongue long after the cup was empty, and soon it wasn't just the taste. It was the way I slipped into unconsciousness so quickly, sinking into a heavy sleep I couldn't shake until morning. I told myself it was stress over work, the Morrison account at the office draining me dry, but deep inside something whispered that wasn't the truth. Then came the mornings when I woke to things being wrong. My laptop, usually left open, was closed and warm to the touch. My phone was resting in a different spot from where I'd placed it. Papers from work shuffled as though someone had been rifling through them. When I confronted David, he just smiled, kissed my cheek, and said I must have forgotten. His words soothed me, but his eyes didn't. There was something behind them now, something I couldn't name. One night, unable to take the gnawing suspicion anymore, I pretended to drink the tea. I lifted the mug to my lips, let a drop touch my tongue, just enough to taste that bitter trace, but swallowed nothing more. David's eyes flickered as he watched me waiting, and when I lied that it was too hot to finish quickly, a tiny frown crossed his face. That's when the truth clawed its way into my chest. He wanted me unconscious. That night I stayed awake. I forced my breathing slow and steady, every muscle in my body stiff with fear. When David came upstairs, he whispered my name like a test. "Sarah," he said softly, then louder, shaking me gently. I didn't move. Finally, he left the room, but not to sleep. For the next hour, I heard his voice, low, sharp, almost foreign, making calls from his office. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew it wasn't the voice of the man who had married me. Near midnight, the sound changed. Footsteps crept back into our bedroom. I risked opening my eyes just the smallest fraction, and what I saw nearly made me gasp aloud. David was crouched by the window, prying up the floorboards of our room. My husband, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, was pulling up wood like he'd done it 100 times before, precise, silent, practiced, and beneath those boards was a metal box. In the faint glow of the hallway light, I saw him lift it out as though it held treasure. He opened it carefully, reverently. Inside were passports, photographs, stacks of papers, multiple passports, each with his face but different names. My blood ran cold. He flipped through documents, studied photos of women who weren't me. And then he smiled. Not the smile I knew, not the smile of warmth and love, but a chilling curve of satisfaction. The smile of a stranger. I lay frozen in bed, pretending to sleep while my entire world crumbled. The bitter tea, the nights I remembered nothing. The moved objects, it all made sense now. David hadn't just been drugging me to hide something small. He was living a life I didn't know existed. And I had been sleeping beside a man I no longer recognized. Even as fear choked me, I knew one thing with perfect clarity: this was only the beginning. Whatever David was hiding in that box, whatever plans he was making in the dark, they were bigger and far more dangerous than I could imagine. Lying there in the darkness, I felt as though I were trapped in someone else's life. The weight of every secret David had hidden pressed against my chest. My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. Who were the women in those photos? Why did he need multiple passports? And most of all, why was he drugging me? I wanted to bolt upright, scream, demand answers, but I knew better. If David had gone this far, if he was willing to slip sleeping pills into my tea night after night, then I couldn't afford to let him know I was awake. Pretending ignorance was the only shield I had left. The next morning, I forced myself to act normal. My hands shook as I buttered toast, but I hid them beneath the table. David sat across from me, sipping his coffee, as though nothing was wrong, smiling that same gentle smile that had once comforted me. But I saw the mask now. Every glance, every word was a performance. Sleep well, he asked casually. Like a rock, I lied, forcing a laugh. My stomach turned as I remembered the bitter tea still sitting untouched in the sink. He reached across the table and touched my hand. Good. You've been working too hard. Rest is important. The irony nearly choked me. Rest was important, yes, important for him to keep me unconscious while he carried out whatever secret life he was hiding. For days, I lived in that fragile balance, pretending to sleep, forcing smiles, acting like nothing was wrong. Each night, I let the tea sit on the counter, feigning forgetfulness, or I poured it discreetly into the sink when David's back was turned. Then I would lie in bed, heart pounding, listening as he crept downstairs or pried up the floorboards again. And each time the box came out, I began to notice patterns. He always checked the passports first, running his fingers over the covers, as if to reassure himself they were real. Then the paper's bank statements, I thought, or maybe contracts, but I couldn't see clearly from where I lay. And always the photos. He lingered over them, tracing the faces of women I didn't know. One night I swore I saw him whisper a name. It was torture playing the helpless wife while my mind screamed for answers. But I needed proof. I needed to know what I was up against. So one evening I made a plan. When David left for his usual late-night run to the pharmacy, his excuse for why he sometimes vanished after dinner, I hurried upstairs, pulled the floorboards loose, and found the box. My hands trembled as I opened it, terrified he might return at any second. What I saw made my blood run cold. The passports were real different countries, different names, all with David's photograph. Some dated years back, others looked new. The bank papers were transfers of money, large amounts moved across accounts in places I barely recognized. Cayman Islands, Zurich, Singapore, and the photos. There were at least 20 of them. Women all different ages, different backgrounds. Some smiling, others caught off guard like they didn't know the picture had been taken. And at the bottom, buried beneath it all, was something that made me nearly drop the box in horror. A photograph of me. It wasn't one I remembered posing for. I was asleep in it, lying on our bed, my hair spread across the pillow. My chest tightened as I realized he must have taken it while I was under the influence of the pills. The realization made my skin crawl. Suddenly, I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway. Panic surged through me. I shoved everything back, slammed the box shut, replaced the floorboards as quickly as I could, and darted back into bed. By the time David walked through the door, I was under the covers, feigning sleep once again. He came upstairs minutes later. I kept my breathing steady, but I could feel his presence hovering over me. I didn't dare open my eyes. His hand brushed my hair back, his voice low and chilling in the darkness. Sweet dreams, Sarah. I nearly broke, then nearly screamed, but I held it in and he walked away. The next day, I sat in the kitchen staring at my reflection in the dark window. I knew I couldn't keep living this way. David was dangerous, and every instinct told me the box was the key to everything. But how could I get it without him knowing? How could I gather proof when every move I made was under his watchful eyes? I thought of going to the police, but what could I say? My husband makes me tea that tastes bitter. He has some passports in a box. They'd laugh me out of the station. Without hard evidence, I was alone. But I wasn't completely alone. I had someone, my sister Claire. Claire and I hadn't spoken much in recent years. Distance, work life, it all got in the way. But if there was ever a time I needed her, it was now. I dialed her number with trembling fingers, praying David wouldn't walk in and catch me. When she answered, her voice was warm and steady. "Sarah, is everything okay?" And just like that, the dam broke. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told her everything, the tea, the box, the photographs, the fear that was eating me alive. She was silent for a long time before she finally spoke. "You can't stay there, Sarah. You need to get out before it's too late." Her words echoed in my mind long after I hung up. Get out. But leaving David wasn't that simple. He was careful, meticulous, and if he suspected I knew anything, I had no doubt he'd stop me before I ever got the chance. So I made my decision. I wouldn't run. Not yet, not without answers, not without exposing who David truly was. I didn't sleep the night after talking to Claire. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft tick of the hallway clock, counting the seconds between my own breaths. Fear ebbed and surged like a tide, but beneath it lived something steadier, colder, a resolve I hadn't known I was capable of. If I ran now, I would live the rest of my life flinching at every shadow, wondering who David really was. If I stayed, I could learn the truth. And once I had the truth, I could burn the lies to the ground. The next afternoon, while David texted that he'd be late at the office, I met Claire at a coffee shop near the river, the kind of place where the windows fog from steam and conversations fold into a blanket of anonymity. When she walked in, I saw the worry sitting in her shoulders before I saw her face. We hugged too tightly, both of us, a little out of breath when we let go, as if the years we'd wasted not talking had sucked the air from our lungs. "I brought something," she said, sliding a worn envelope across the table. "I didn't want to tell you over the phone." Inside were photographs, sun-faded, curling at the edges. My breath caught. My mother's face looked back at me, younger than I remembered, laughter frozen in a candid smile. Next to her stood a man with an easy grin and a hand draped over her shoulder like he belonged there. He was handsome in that careless way that makes you forgive too much too quickly. He was also unmistakably familiar. It was David. Or rather, it was David's face. Shorn hair, different glasses, a decade younger, but the same tilt of the smile, the same confident slack in the shoulders. On the back, in my mother's neat script, "Summer Harbor Days, Evan." I swallowed so hard it hurt. "Evan?" Claire nodded. "Mom dated him long before she met Dad. It blew up. He drained her savings, disappeared, and left her with a stack of credit card debt she hid for years. She told me when I turned 21, said she didn't want me to fall for men who wear charm like armor." She touched the photo's edge. "When you got engaged to David, she hated him. I thought it was just mom being mom, protective, judgmental. But at the engagement party, she went quiet like she'd seen a ghost. She never said it out loud, but after she died, I found the envelope. I stared at the name on the back of the photo until the letters blurred. Evan, David. The shape of a truth I didn't want unfolded anyway. You think he's the same man? I think he's been the same kind of man for a very long time, she said softly. And I think Mom recognized him in a way we didn't. Heat crawled up my neck. I thought of the passports, each with David's face and a new name. The photos of other women, their smiles bright and unguarded, captured before they knew they were souvenirs. The transfers, the late-night calls, the box beneath my floor. "There's more," Claire said, pulling out a second slip of paper, tissue-thin, folded a dozen times. A bank statement from years ago, my mother's name stamped in the corner, the balance dipping in jagged cuts like a heartbeat failing. She kept this because she wanted to remember, I think. Not the pain, just the pattern. The pattern. That word landed with the weight of prophecy. A draft teased the edge of the envelope, releasing a final item, a small key taped to a note in my mother's handwriting. "If anyone ever makes you feel like you're falling asleep in your own life, wake up. Box 317, Lockwell Trust." I looked up sharply. "A safety deposit box," Claire shrugged. I didn't open it. It felt like something she meant for us, not just me, but Sarah. Her voice softened. "Mom wasn't perfect, but she knew monsters. She knew how they hide." We left half-full cups behind and drove to Lockwell Trust, a stone bank with ivy creeping up its ribs like nature reclaiming pride. My palms sweated against the steering wheel the whole way. Claire reached over once at a red light and squeezed my hand the way you soothe a child on a plane. I squeezed back, grateful to be someone's little sister again, if only for a second. In the cold quiet of the vault, the clerk slid box 317 onto a narrow table and retreated with polite indifference. I broke the seal with the key. Inside lay a thin stack of papers, a flash drive, and a spiral notebook with the first page labeled "Names I Will Never Forget." We skimmed. Dates, cities, hotel names, descriptions of a man called Evan, then Adam, then Daniel, a constellation of aliases orbiting the same face. My mother had traced his path like a woman mapping a storm, not because she planned to chase him, but because she feared he would circle back. In the notebook's center, she had taped a photocopy of a missing persons flyer, Elise Warren, last seen leaving a bar with a man described as mid-30s, brown hair, wire-rim glasses. And below, in my mother's tiny, furious script, "He doesn't just take money, he takes years." The flash drive contained scans, old police reports, bank transfers with payees I recognized from David's midnight paperwork, emails from women describing a man who dazzled and then vanished, leaving debt and doubt like a stain no detergent could lift. One email stopped me cold. I kept falling asleep. I thought I was sick. He brought me tea every night. The room tilted. I gripped the table until the metal edge bit my palm. "He's been doing it forever," I whispered. "The tea, the passports, the names." Claire's jaw clenched. "We take this to the police." Without the box from the house, I said, shaking my head. "They'll say it's all circumstantial. They'll say my mother was bitter and we're grieving daughters seeing patterns in clouds. Then we get the box." The terror in me wanted to say no. The woman who had been falling asleep inside her own life stepped forward and said yes. We planned like thieves. Claire would wait in the car with her phone on record, the engine running. I would go home at my usual hour, make dinner act soft and grateful, while David handed me a mug. When he left for his nightly errand, I'd pull the boards, take photos of everything, tuck the flash drive copy inside, and leave a decoy, an empty metal tin weighted with old receipts. The real contents would ride out under my coat. It could fall apart in 100 ways. He could come home early. He could notice the swapped weight. He could hear the ragged drum of my lungs. But there are moments in a life when not acting is more dangerous than doing the wrong thing. I had reached mine. That evening, I chopped onions with steady hands and asked him about his day. I smiled when he told me about a client I suspect didn't exist. When he set the mug by my elbow, the steam curled like a hand beckoning me to lie down. I lifted it, let the barest hint of bitterness kiss my tongue, and set it aside to cool. He kissed my forehead. "Back in 20, he said. The door closed. I didn't breathe for 3 beats. Then I moved. The boards came up faster this time, my fear sharpening every motion. The metal box was cool and slick in my hands. I opened it, my phone camera flashing through page after page, passports, transfers, photos. I slid the flash drive from my mother's box into the stack, took a final shot of the whole interior, and set the decoy in place. As I reached to lower the boards, a floorboard creaked in the hall. "Keys, the front door, too soon." My heart slammed. I shoved the real box under my coat and pressed the wood down with my palm, willing it to sit flush. Footsteps, a shadow under the bedroom door. Sarah David's voice was soft, curious. "Forgot my wallet." I swallowed my panic and stretched out on the bed, forcing my shoulders to sink, my breaths to slow, the coat tucked beneath me like an extra spine. The door opened. He stepped inside. His shoes stopped beside the bed. I tasted metal in my mouth. "Already asleep," he murmured. A pause. The air shifted. The boards did not rattle. The door closed again. Footsteps retreated. The front door clicked. Only then did I let the air flood my lungs. I slid off the bed, cradled the box like a newborn, and ran. The night air cut across my face as I sprinted down the street, clutching the metal box to my chest like it was a lifeline. Claire's headlights flashed once, twice, and then I was yanking the car door open and diving inside. She didn't ask questions. She just hit the gas, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, as we sped away from the house I had once called home. Only when we turned onto the highway did I let myself breathe. My body shook so violently, I thought my teeth might crack. Claire reached over, her hand warm on my knee. "You've got it." I opened my coat just enough to reveal the box glinting in the dashboard light. "I've got it." We drove in silence for a while, the hum of the tires filling the void where words should have been. I couldn't stop replaying the moment, the creak of the door, the shadow under the frame, David's voice so close, I could feel it brush against my skin. If he'd noticed even the slightest thing out of place, if he'd touched the floorboards, or seen the edge of my coat, I would not be sitting here now. At Claire's apartment, we locked the door behind us, drew the curtains, and set the box on the kitchen table. The weight of it seemed to warp the air, like every secret inside was pressing against the metal walls, begging to be released. Claire poured us both coffee. Though neither of us needed caffeine, our nerves were frayed enough already. Together we went through everything. Passport after passport, each with David's face and a new name: Evan, Daniel, Matthew, Chris. The bank documents revealed a web of accounts, money funneled in and out of shell companies, each paper trail carefully layered to hide the origin. But it was the photographs that broke me. There were more than I remembered. Women of every age, every look caught in moments that felt both ordinary and intimate, at a cafe table, walking out of a bookstore, sitting in a car. Some of the photos had dates scrawled on the back. Others had nothing. But one thing connected them all: none of the women looked aware they were being watched. And then there was me. The photo of me sleeping on our bed. My breath stuttered as I stared at my own face, so vulnerable, so exposed. Claire's jaw tightened as she looked at it. "This isn't love," she said softly. "This is surveillance." I wanted to burn it all, to throw the box into a fire and watch the ashes scatter. But I knew we couldn't. This was evidence of what I didn't fully understand yet, but evidence nonetheless. Claire called a friend of hers, a journalist who had covered corruption cases. She didn't give details, just said we had information that needed a safe pair of eyes. He agreed to meet us the next day at a diner outside of town. Until then, all we could do was wait. That night, sleep refused to come. Every creak of the building made me flinch. Every passing car sent adrenaline spiking through my veins. I imagined David walking up the stairs, his hand on the doorknob, his smile calm, as he found me with the box laid bare. I pressed the quilt tighter around me, telling myself over and over, "You're safe. He doesn't know where you are. You're safe." Morning light didn't bring peace, only urgency. We packed the box into a duffel bag wrapped in layers of clothing to muffle its sound. At the diner, the journalist Mark sat in a corner booth, glasses slipping down his nose, a notepad already open. When we slid the duffel onto the seat beside him and opened it, his eyes widened. He lifted a passport, turned it over in his hands, scanned the documents, the photos. His lips pressed into a thin line. "This," he whispered, "this is bigger than anything I expected." "Who is he?" I asked, my voice cracking. "What has he been doing?" Mark looked at me, then at Claire. His expression was grave. "This isn't just a con man. This is organized. These accounts, these aliases, they point to trafficking, fraud, maybe even disappearances. These women—" He tapped the stack of photos. "They might not just be victims of theft. Some of them might be missing." The room spun. My stomach lurched so violently I had to grip the edge of the table. Claire's hand closed around mine, grounding me, but her face had gone pale. Mark lowered his voice. "If he realizes this box is gone, he'll come after you. You need to disappear until the authorities can act. This is evidence, but it also paints a target on your back." I wanted to argue, to say I wasn't afraid, but the words stuck in my throat. Because I was afraid, terrified. David wasn't just a liar. He wasn't just a cruel husband. He was something much darker, something I could barely name. Claire spoke for me. "Then we go to the police now. Today." Mark nodded. "Today. And you?" He looked at me, his voice softening. "You need to be ready. Once this starts, there's no undoing it. His mask will shatter, but so will your old life." I swallowed hard, staring at the passports scattered across the table. My old life was already gone. All that was left was survival and the hope that by exposing him I could save others from falling asleep in a life built on lies. By the time we walked into the police station with the duffel bag, my nerves were so frayed I thought my skin might peel away. Every step felt like I was dragging the weight of years behind me, years of trust, of love, of lies. The officer at the front desk looked bored until Claire set the bag on the counter and unzipped it just enough to reveal the edge of a passport and a stack of bank documents. Then his eyes sharpened. Within minutes, we were ushered into a small room with beige walls and a metal table that smelled faintly of bleach. Detectives came and went, their faces unreadable as they flipped through the contents of the box. One of them, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice like steel, asked me to start from the beginning. My throat went dry. I told them about the bitter tea, the nights I couldn't remember the photograph of me sleeping in my own bed. I told them about my mother's notes, the safety deposit box, the names that trailed behind David like ghosts. My voice shook, but I forced myself to keep going. If I stopped, I knew I'd break. When I finished, the room was silent except for the quiet scratch of a pen. Finally, the detective looked up. "Sarah, what you've brought us could blow open an ongoing investigation we've had for years. We've tracked fragments of this network but never had a name, never had proof tying it all together. This," she gestured at the documents, "this might be the key." Relief and dread crashed through me at once. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. But it also meant that the man I had shared a bed with wasn't just dangerous, he was the center of something far larger, far deadlier. They asked me to stay hidden while they built the case. Protective custody, they called it. A safe house. Claire refused to leave my side, insisting she'd go wherever I went. I don't know what I would have done without her. The days blurred together in that safe house. I jumped at every knock, every ring of the phone, certain it was David who had found me. Nights were worse, my mind replayed his whisper-sweet dreams, Sarah over and over, until I wanted to claw it out of my skull. But beneath the fear, a new fire grew. He had stolen my trust, my safety, even my sleep. I would not let him steal my courage. Weeks later, the news broke. Prominent businessman arrested in multi-state fraud and trafficking ring. David's face stared back at me from every screen, his eyes no longer gentle, no longer hidden. The world saw him as I now did, a predator cloaked in charm. He was led out of our home in handcuffs, the box of lies finally opened for everyone to see. I thought I would feel triumph. Instead, I felt hollow, like the pieces of me he had chipped away were still scattered on the floor of that house. Closure wasn't clean. Healing wasn't instant. It came in small ways, Claire bringing me tea without bitterness, the kind my mother used to make. Long walks by the river where I could finally breathe without checking over my shoulder, writing down my story, every painful detail, until the words felt less like wounds and more like scars. One evening, sitting on Claire's balcony as the sun bled gold into the sky, she said quietly, "You saved yourself, Sarah. You saved others, too." Her words sank into me, and for the first time I believed them. Because survival wasn't just about running, it was about speaking, about refusing to let silence protect the wrong people. If you're listening to this, maybe you felt that same gnawing doubt, that same bitter taste that tells you something is wrong. Don't ignore it. Don't let anyone tell you your instincts are paranoia. Trust yourself. Protect yourself. Because sometimes the person you think you know best wears the darkest mask of all. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need strength, subscribe for more, and leave a comment with your own story. I promise I'll read every one.